Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm happy to be here on Wednesday, July 19th. This year is just flying by. Yeah, wow. But I'm happy to be here today. I'm here to chat with you about pretty much anything you want. You can ask me anything that's not a spoiler for stuff that we're working on at Stonemaier Games. And I'll have some basic news to share about Stonemaier Games today, and some random topics. Good morning, Chad. Good to see you today. I do have a Rolling Realms live play today, tomorrow, and Friday at 3:30 Central Time. So that's St. Louis time, CST, 3:30 the next 3 days. And the realms that we're doing today, finally, it'll be the debut of the Expedition realm, along with Tricarian and Scythe. So that combination of realms will be played today at 3:30 on the Rolling Realms Facebook group, and then posted almost immediately afterwards on YouTube if you prefer to watch on YouTube. It won't be live on YouTube, but it will be soon after. Stephen, Ian, Mark, Julie, you all are, Miles, Garrett, Eric, thank you for joining me today. And anyone else who comments or doesn't comment, I am happy to have you here today. So I had a really fun weekend, basically. My friend Miles was there. Miles is in the chat here. And I spent the weekend at a place called the Gamers Ranch in the middle of Missouri. It is basically a giant house that someone has created, a guy named David has created for gamers to come and play. And you rent it out kind of Airbnb style. It sleeps a little over 20 people. We had 22, 23 at one point. And you just play games for a few days. The whole place is stocked with thousands of tabletop games, and also pinball machines and video games, and a miniatures painting station, and Legos and family games and kid games and heavy gamer games. All sorts of games were there, dexterity games, plus a full, beautiful 18-hole disc golf course that we played on several times, perhaps too many times for my old arm, but I still had a lot of fun playing all those different games. I have photos of many of the games that I played over the course of the weekend. I'll talk about those in a second, but I do see a few quick questions, so I'll answer them first. Steve said he's loving his copy of Expeditions, and actually I should do a shipping update for Expeditions as well, so I'll do that in a second. Steve said he's loving his copy. I'm glad to hear that, Steve. Did you sign some of the journal entries? I did. It's been fun to see people discover that over the last few days. So I had Panda, well, they didn't, over the course of several sample copies of the game, I had accumulated around 40 journal entries. And so I signed the ones that I had, and I sent them back over to Panda in China, and they randomly inserted them in a variety of copies. As far as I can recall, they went into both Ironclad and standard versions of the games. So there are around 40 signed journals that might be inside your copy of Expeditions, and I tried to make sure that those were the copies that were on our web store. It's possible some of them might end up in retail copies as well, but yeah, so it's possible when you open your copy of Expeditions, there will be a little comment. I had fun trying to think of 40 different little things that I could say before I signed my name off, so every one of those is unique, and people have been posting some of them in the Facebook group and on Board Game Geek. So that's fun to see people discover that. Pete is here as well. Pete was at Gamers Ranch this weekend. Sam said, "Hope I had a blast at the Gamers Ranch." I absolutely did. I'll share some of the games that I played in a moment. The new to me games. Carlos says, "What a nice surprise that you scattered different journal pages in Expeditions." So that's kind of a separate thing from the signed copies. Every copy of Expeditions has one of 20 different journal pages, and people have been posting them on the Facebook group as well. Chad liked that as well. Let's see. He says, "What sparked that idea?" Really, Jakob had written these journal entries because the idea is that multiple expeditions have happened to this region of a fictional version of Tunguska. Multiple expeditions have happened, and one of them, the person who went on the expedition wrote these journal entries, and they kind of got lost along the way. The person got lost, the expedition got lost, but the journal entries were found. And Jakob had written these entries, and at different points in the design of the game, those journal entries were included in the gameplay itself. But I found that people weren't actually reading them in playtest. People were treating the game as it is, kind of like a Euro-style game. They weren't delving into any narrative text. And so I moved that aside, and then later in the process, I realized I really love these journal entries. I wish there was a way to include them in the game. And so I decided to put them on the back of the achievement sheet. So the achievement sheet is the same for every game, but on the back side is one of the 20 different journal entries, with my hope being kind of this feeling of discovering journal entries that are found in different places that you could find your own journal entry and then look on the Facebook group or on Board Game Geek or search online and find what the other journal entries might say. They are not gameplay related at all. It is just they're connected to each of the locations. They're just for flavor. But yeah, that's where the idea came from. George is here live for the first time in a long time. Good to see you, George. Chad says, hey, how many games of Expeditions were played at the ranch? Actually, 0 were played at the ranch. I would have gladly played it or taught it. And there was 1 copy there, but we were playing stuff. I think we generally targeted stuff that we don't normally have access to. And we have access to Expeditions easily back here in St. Louis. Let's see. Steve said he liked the comment that I wrote on his journal entry. So yeah, let me do shipping update for Expeditions, and then I'll talk about the games that I played at the Gamers Ranch over the past weekend. So shipping update for Expeditions. Joe sent me an update. He says, okay, in the U.S., the champion orders, the last champion orders should finish today, and so you should get a tracking number if you're in the U.S. and you're a champion and you pre-ordered Expeditions today, maybe tomorrow. Sometimes they take a day or so to go out. The entire ship out is still projected to go out by the end of the month, end of July. So any remaining champion orders. Of course, there are Wave 2 Ironclad editions because we sold out of Wave 1 of Ironclad. There are Wave 2 Ironclad editions that won't be shipped until the end of August. That's a separate shipment that we haven't even received yet. In Canada, it looks like fulfillment is complete. So if you had a pre-order in Canada, you should have received a tracking number by now. Australia, fulfillment is also complete as far as we can tell for all customers. And then in the UK, which covers all of Europe, there was a little bit of a lag, not in the shipping itself, but in the in tracking numbers being sent. But that seems to be resolved now. The last few champion orders shipped out on Monday. So if you're a champion, you should have received a tracking notification. And all other pre-order fulfillment should end by the end of this week. So if you heard that and you are, so basically I would say overall, if you have pre-ordered Expeditions and in Europe, Australia, or Canada, and by early next week, or by the end of this week, really, you have not received a tracking number, let us know, and we're happy to look into it. Send an email to contact@stonemeyer.com with your order number, and we'll look into it. If you are in the U.S., if you're a champion, you should receive a tracking number by tomorrow at the latest. Let's say end of the week, just in case. And if you're not a champion, wait until the end of July. If you still haven't received a tracking notification, we'll let you know. We had by far the most orders in the U.S. That's why it's taking the longest to ship out orders in the U.S. The good news is, I mean, this feels a little bit like a gloat or a brag, but from the very beginning, from early February, I believe I said that shipping would happen in mid-July, and that is exactly what's happening here. Shipping is happening. I said shipping would start in mid-July, and now it is not only just starting, it started a little bit early, and we're finishing in July. So I think one of the perks of not running a crowdfunding campaign and just having the game ready to go and essentially already in production is that we can offer a fairly accurate estimate as to when we'll actually ship to you. But I do appreciate your patience. These fulfillment centers take time to ship out this many games, but it's been very exciting for me to see you all open your copies, look through the components, even play your first game. And we are always here to help with questions that you have on Board Game Geek, on our website, in the comments, and on Facebook. And on YouTube too, if you want to post questions on the videos there. So Chad says, how many games of Chad asked about Expeditions. How many games in general were played at the Gamers Ranch? So I spent the last weekend at a Gamers Ranch, which is a big place that contains a ton of games and a disc golf course. I spent that time with around 20 friends, and we played a ton of games. The new to me games, I'll flash them up on the screen real quick here. I played Turing Machine, a deduction game that clicked on the second round, and I really, really enjoyed it. We played the real-time horse betting game called Ready, Set, Bet. I also had a lot of fun with that. Really had a lot of fun with most of the games that I played. Mountain Goats, kind of a lighter version of Can't Stop. Played that at Gamers Ranch. I learned and played Heat twice. So this is Heat. This is a deck building racing game that I've been wanting to play for quite some time. I really enjoyed it. And I played it on 2 different maps. Played a game called Paper Tales, a drafting game, a little bit like Seven Wonders. I played the dueling game, a few different dueling games. Played Rift Force. Rift Force is it's a game where you're using a combination of different factions to try to defeat your opponent, have more victory points than your opponent. I enjoyed that one. I played probably the heaviest game I played, or new to me game I played, is a game called Trailblazer, the John Muir Trail. And this was a lot of fun. Some set collection, worker placement, progressing on a trail, collecting tokens, icons, and lots of unique thematic mechanisms. I really enjoyed Trailblazer. I played War Chest for the first time after also playing Undaunted for the first time recently. They're very similar games. This is bag building. Undaunted is deck building. I enjoyed that one. Beer and Bread. This is a two-player game I've been wanting to play for quite some time. I do like two-player dueling games. Like I played the Star Wars deck building games a few times over the course of the weekend. I really enjoy that. But I also enjoy two-player games where you're not fighting against the opponent. You're just trying to build a better engine than them or build something better than your opponent. And last, I played Bad Company, which is kind of like the game Space Base, but with a heist theme. And I generally enjoy heist themes. I enjoyed this game. Also, I didn't have a photo of it, but we played Green Team Wins, the party game Green Team Wins. I had a lot of fun with these games, and yesterday I filmed 11 videos about my favorite mechanisms in all 11 of the new to me games that I played over the course of the weekend. I also played another 10 games, like I mentioned, Star Wars deck building game. What else did I play? I played Earth. I played Castles in Burgundy, the Collector's Edition. I played a lot of games that I had already played, and I don't have photos of them, but yeah, it was just a wonderful time. And the question I put up on Instagram today was, if you had a whole weekend just to play games with 20 of your favorite people, what are some of the games that you think you would play with them? And would the time of day impact the game that you choose? That definitely had an impact on it. We were playing kind of heavier games during the day often and then lighter games at night. Okay, back to comments here. Sean has a nice comment. I absolutely love the quality of the products you continually put out, as well as your approach to running your business. It's very admirable. Easily my favorite publisher. Well, thank you, Sean. That means a lot to me to hear. I know there are a lot of amazing publishers out there, so for you to think of us that way, that means a lot to me. Justin says, you mentioned that you are working on an expansion for Expeditions. That is correct. I am in the early stages of working on an expansion for Expeditions. He says, surely some of the ideas that will be explored in the expansions are ideas that crossed your mind while developing the base game. Actually, not really. When I design a game, I test a bunch of different ideas and I try to put all of the good ideas that function and that make the game fun and functional and intuitive and balanced. I put them all in the core game. It isn't until often well after I'm finished designing the game, because my brain is fully focused on that core game. I'm not setting aside things for the future. The one exception for that, for Expeditions, is that I left room in the insert to hold 2 more mechs. I had not designed those mechs, but I think there's a distinct possibility that if the game does well, that we'll want to add more mechs, and I want to have room in the insert for them. And so I added 2 slots for 2 new mechs in the insert itself. That's really the only thought I put into the expansion during the design of the core game. Justin said, how do you determine what ideas are crucial to work with in the base game and which ones might be better left for expansions? Yeah, like I said, every idea that I think is fun, a lot of fun, I put into the core game itself. I don't hold back anything for the expansion. And my brain just doesn't work that way. I can't start thinking about the expansion until, oftentimes until the core game is published or finished with production. I need a break from designing the core game before I can really think about the expansion stuff. Michael says that he's loving expansion so far. He says, is there going to be a form we fill out like we did with Tapestry to track strength of character and mech combinations? You know, Michael, I like that idea. I didn't mention it in the rulebook in Expeditions, but why not? Yeah, I'd love to collect that data. I'll make a note about that. Expeditions data collection form. Yeah, I like that. Thanks for that idea. Carol from the Mill is popping in here. Good to see you, Carol. Mike confirmed his receipt of Expeditions. DG is joining us again. He says, how's my week going? My week is going well. Like I mentioned earlier in the livecast, I spent the last weekend playing a ton of games with friends and eating good food, playing disc golf at the Gamers Ranch in the middle of Missouri. And so I've been catching up on a little bit of work. I worked a little bit in the mornings. I usually woke up before most other people at the Gamers Ranch and got a little bit of work done. But I'm still catching up a little bit. So my week's going well so far, and I'm just catching up on work. Kevin got his copy of Expeditions. Hilda's looking forward to booking the Gamers Ranch. Yeah. Make sure you book well in advance. Hilda's looking for April. Yeah, we're actually looking for times to place our reservation for next year and the following year because every single weekend next summer is already booked at the Gamers Ranch. It's that popular. Kirill says, did you watch the Gen Con games anticipation videos? Are there any games people are talking about for Gen Con that you're interested in? You know, I should watch more of those videos. As the type of video that I generally don't get, I don't get too excited about games anticipation videos. I get more excited about games that have, when people have actually played the games, what they think about the games, rather than what they hope the games will be. So I don't watch many of those videos, but maybe I should check out a few of them because it is important for me to keep an eye on the types of things that get people excited. The science of anticipation is always something that I really enjoy. Miles says that he really enjoyed the game of Heat that he played in. It was very fun to play Heat with Miles. Miles was getting very excited about making a big move in the Heat, and then he would draw a card that would not result in a big move, which was fun for the rest of us, and I'm glad Miles had fun with it, even though he had a little bit of bad luck there. Barry says that he's enjoying Expeditions. He's played twice so far. That's awesome, Barry. I'm glad you're having fun with it. GG says that Turing Machine is a marvel to him. That is, I think, the first game that I held up here, this deduction game with these punchboard cards. So it doesn't use an app. It uses these punchboard cards as you test different number and color combinations against different clues to see if they meet the conditions on those clues or not. It is a marvel of graphic design and product design. Julie says, what did you like about the Star Wars deck building game? This is a game that I've been playing for about 6 months now, Julie, and I played it maybe a dozen times. It was a big hit at the Gamers Weekend because a lot of people seem to discover it for the first time over the Gamers Ranch weekend. There's a lot that I like about it, about the theme, the core deck building mechanism I really enjoy, but the number one thing about the game that I really love is that the main conflict of the game, the time where you are actively kind of fighting against an antagonistic force, is with the card row itself, not your opponent. So there are times in the games where your opponent puts out a ship and you can destroy that ship. But that's the only thing an opponent has that you can destroy. And even that ship goes back into their deck. Rather, the main interaction is with the card row. So if I'm playing as the Rebels and the Darth Vader card shows up in the card row, I can use quite a bit of military force, I think whatever the resource is, to take out Darth Vader before my opponent has the chance to acquire Darth Vader. And so that's a big decision point in the game. Am I going to use my power to try to remove this card from the card row before my opponent gets it? Or am I going to use that power to try to reduce my opponent's base life to 0, which is also really important. That's how you win the game. You have to destroy three opponent bases. So I love that decision space. And not only that, but there's also a reward that you get. If I defeat Darth Vader in the card row, I get a bonus. I get an instant bonus right away. I also, maybe a secondary thing, I really love the base system, the bases that you have. There are different planets in Star Wars, the deck building game, because when your first base is destroyed, which is kind of a default basic base, you get to then bring in one of 10 other bases, each of which has either an ongoing or a one-time ability. And they're very powerful. And so you have to decide at this moment in the game, what is really most important to me to get into play to take out my opponent based on timing and the deck that I built so far. I've been thinking about honestly doing a video about my top 10 favorite things about the game because I really, really love the game. And I think there might be 10 things I could talk about. And I'm going to make a note about that because I was just thinking about that earlier. Chat says, how is Mr. Biddy doing? My cat Biddy, who is very old and fairly sick. He's doing okay. I mean, he's been very affectionate and cuddly lately, which is very sweet. It's also typically a sign that he is in some pain. And so I'm trying to keep an eye on that. I mean, I'm constantly worried about him. I do think based on how he's responding to the chemotherapy. Oh, for those who don't know, Biddy has intestinal lymphoma. And so he's a 16-and-a-half-year-old diabetic cat with no teeth anymore. He's gone through a lot in his life, but he's had mostly, as far as I can tell, a very happy life. I've given him a lot of love. Megan gives him a lot of love. But the cancer is going to be tough to beat. So he's on chemo pills. He's on a steroid pill, and really those pills are meant to keep him comfortable. They are not going to fix the cancer. They cannot fix the cancer. So they're just here to keep him comfortable. And so the main question that I have that I'm monitoring is he comfortable right now? And if the answer is yes, I'll continue doing what we're doing so far. My main concern is that he really is not, he's still not eating much food. He has access to Walter's dry food down here. He has access to wet food over there, but he isn't eating much more than really soupy food. And so I've been finding liquid food that he will eat, that he likes the taste of. And he's been eating that so far. Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Chad. Tonk says, my game group and him played their first 2 games of Expeditions and have enjoyed them. We've also played a lot of Oath over the last year, and the 2 games have led to interesting conversations about player interaction. For us, negotiation, kingmaking, and switching collaborations between players are our favorite forms of interaction. What are your thoughts on those forms of player interaction? Yeah, I really like those. I think, especially if a game is designed for those forms of interaction, otherwise they can often slow down a game. But if a group enjoys them, then it doesn't feel like downtime. It feels like you're having fun while doing that. I would say, for me, not to bash Oath. Oath wasn't a good fit for me at all. But the game that provided what I think Oath was trying to do, but provided it for me and a much better fit, was The King's Dilemma. The King's Dilemma, I thought, provided an amazing form of player interaction, exactly as you described there. So if you enjoyed Oath, I would highly recommend The King's Dilemma or The Queen's Dilemma, which is the newer version that will come out, I think, sometime next year. I highly recommend those games. Yeah. Carol says, can we anticipate any Stonemaier surprises for Gen Con? So, yes, you can. There's one small surprise that we haven't revealed for Gen Con that I won't reveal yet. I'll reveal it on August 2nd, I think, the Wednesday right before Gen Con. And then I will, of course, surprise you, I think, at that point. I'll probably wait until that point to surprise you with the new realms, the new ruling realms that will release then. And there actually is a surprise attached to those realms as well. So, yeah, you have a few little surprises for Gen Con. For those wondering, I won't personally be at Gen Con, but most of my team will be there. So you can see lots of friendly Stonemaier faces at Gen Con. Oh, also, I did sign a bunch of Expeditions cards the other day. I think maybe 500 or 600 cards. So if you go to Gen Con, you can hopefully get one of those signed cards from Expeditions. Pete says, how would you compare your first impressions of War Chest versus Undaunted? Yeah, Pete was very kind to teach me Undaunted a few weeks ago, and I got to play War Chest, which Pete had mentioned as the predecessor to Undaunted. Got to play this. I mean, they're very similar in terms of how you have units that you're deciding to put into your bag or not, or into your deck, and those units correlate to the units on the board. I don't know, Pete. They're very similar. It's slightly easier to shuffle in a bag building game. The initiative decision was slightly more interesting in Undaunted, and I thought the different scenarios in Undaunted were interesting. I do really like the different combination, like the kind of the abstract game puzzle here of having 3 different units, a combination of 3 different units in War Chest. I think there are different combinations of units and asymmetry in Undaunted as well, but I kind of just like to shuffle them all up and either draft or gain 3 different units and try to figure out what's the best way to gain those units, or to optimize to use those units in War Chest. The one concern, and I don't know if this applies to Undaunted, it might a little bit, but in War Chest, it felt a little bit like there was a stalemate at some point. And there was eventually a winner, but for a lot of the game, it was like, okay, I would go to a space, I would manage to put down one of our tokens there, and then I would hold it for a little bit, and then the opponent would come in and take it back. And so there was a little bit of a stalemate there that I wonder. I've only played Undaunted once, as you know. I wonder if Undaunted counters that a little bit to avoid that stalemate-y feel. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what you, Pete, or anyone else who's played War Chest and Undaunted thinks about that comparison. Garrett says he really appreciated my blog about working from home and the answer to his follow-up question. Thanks, Garrett. It has definitely been helpful advice as I navigate the new workplace environment. Yeah, Garrett had mentioned that he's now working at home. His wife also works from home, and they're navigating that. I had written about that a few years ago when both Megan and I started working from the same home, figuring out what that meant for us, how we could respect each other's space. Chad says, if I had a few days to play games, that was my question to all of you today, I would definitely take my entire shelf of opportunity. A lot of times it feels like I will never get to all those games. Yeah, I can relate to that, Chad. And one of the fun things about the Gamers Ranch is that the collection is so big that we really didn't need to bring many games. There are many games that we have on our shelves that we either love or are on our shelves of opportunity that you can look up on the Gamers Ranch master list on Board Game Geek and see, hey, they already have that game. So you don't have to bring it, you can just play their version of the game. And oftentimes it's the fanciest version of that game. Let me see if I do have another question of the day. Lots of comments today. But the blog post. Yeah, I actually don't know what my blog. I often have been asking questions on this live cast to give me thoughts about future blog posts. So, well, one of the things I've been contemplating talking about is the idea of seasons of content. So I'm curious what you all think about that. If you have any thoughts about seasons of content. We talked about that a little bit in one of the previous live casts a while ago about seasonal content. That's not exactly what I mean here. By seasons of content here, I'm referring to how some podcasts have like season 1 of this podcast or season 2. TV shows often have this, right? Almost every show has season 1, season 2. But I'm wondering what the advantage is to doing that rather than just having a continuous show. And I think there are advantages. Like sometimes there's a distinct beginning and end, and that can feel good. Sometimes there's a theme that goes over the course of the season. Like one of my favorite podcasts is Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. And he has a bunch of random topics each season, but he often also has a central theme for a season. But I'm thinking about it a little bit because my Stonemaier Games blog definitely does not have a season. It has no seasonal content, or it doesn't have seasons of content. My YouTube channel doesn't have seasons of content. It's just I post regular content week to week. So I'm wondering, are there certain circumstances with it where it's better? Is it potentially always better to have seasons of content so you can have that distinct beginning and end? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. Carl says, I finally had the chance to play Wingspan Flock Mode, which is when you play with the Asia expansion, or part of the Asia expansion that brings it up to 6 or 7 players. He says, I knew I'd enjoyed it, but I did not expect how smoothly it was going to go. Easily my favorite way to play Wingspan now. Thanks for keeping the game fresh. That's my pleasure. It was an idea I tossed out there to Elizabeth, just the idea of adding a way to play faster with 6 or 7 players, given that we were adding 2 players with Wingspan Asia. But the concept and the execution was all Elizabeth. Elizabeth did a fantastic job with that. Hard to play test with 6 or 7 players, but we made it happen when possible. George says he just got Tapestry and have played the base game about 6 times, and him and his wife cannot clear 200 points. Any tips or suggestions about how to get over that 200 benchmark? George, it's a great question. Some people watching here might have some tips. Also, the Tapestry Facebook group might have some tips. The main thing that I can think of that has helped me get a little bit over it, I'm not great at Tapestry, but I can get a little bit over it, is to really optimize resource production early in the game and to try to get one more turn early in the game that results in more resource production. Because if you can get more of those income buildings out that produce resources early in the game, those are resources that will help you for the rest of the game, because you're getting them as income in every era. So I typically try to really focus on that in the first turn, get as many income buildings out as possible that are generating resources, and that I found can help me get over 200 points. Nathan says he got the new game Scaventeer because I saw it was designed by Morton. It's a tough but fun puzzle. Nathan, yeah, but Automa Factory's lead designer Morton, who designs or works with and helps produce and design the solo modes for all Stonemaier games. He designed a game completely independent of Stonemaier games that was published by another publisher called Scaventeer. It's spelled Skoventyr. I haven't played it yet, but I'm very curious about it. Victor says it's game day with Wingspan and Scythe with 4 rookies on Friday. That's awesome, Victor, and thank you so much for bringing our games to those people and sharing our games with those people. You could even do Scythe and Expeditions, play Scythe and then play Expeditions back to back. I'm curious how that feels when you play them back to back like that. Joshua says, what game got me into the hobby? I was kind of getting into the game hobby as a youngster, 7, 8 years old. I was playing games like Key to the Kingdom, Magic the Gathering, Scotland Yard. Not Magic the Gathering when I was 7 or 8. That was when I was like 12 or 13. Millborn, playing some card games. classic American games like Monopoly. Um, but yeah, all those games kind of got me into the hobby at first. Chess as well, of course. And then as an adult, I re-entered the hobby. I'd been playing games my whole life, but played mostly like hearts and poker in college and soon after college. And then I got back into Magic. I got into Catan, got into Agricola, and then Stone Age and Fresco and Dominion. And then it was off to the races from there. Carol says sometimes anticipation videos have games that are more new to the US or just haven't been widely available or are new. For instance, Expeditions is on some of the lists. That's good to hear that people are anticipating Expeditions even as we're delivering pre-order copies. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I should. I can. That's another way for me to become aware of games that I'm not as aware of. DG says mentioning my mention of designing expeditions and making sure it was fun reminded me that Gabe interviewed you for his Find the Fun book, which is on Kickstarter now. How was that process? Any nuggets of design wisdom you could preview here? Well, DG, the best way to get my thoughts on kind of the design process of expeditions is to look at the design diaries on our website. They include written posts and videos about the design process for expeditions. Let me see if I can think of one nugget right now from designing the game. Well, one thing I definitely learned is that I wanted the game at the beginning to be a deck building game or a bag building game with a rondelle. Basically, two mechanisms I love that I have not gotten to work with yet. And I found the more I tried to force those mechanisms, not the worse the game got, but the longer the game took to design. And the game finally started to really hum when I realized that there were better mechanisms for this particular game that I could use. That deck building wasn't a good match for the quest system in particular, and that the rondelle system just wasn't working for giving players the freedom they needed to move around the board and take the gather actions they really wanted. And so once I removed those systems, once I gave up on these mechanisms that I started designing the game around in the first place, the game really flourished. So it's a good reminder to me that sometimes it's good to give up certain mechanisms that you would hope to include in the game. Steve says that Kingsburg got him into the hobby and Terraforming Mars was the first game he bought. I like that question. First game you bought and game that got you into the modern gaming hobby. So I've done Expedition Shipping Update. I talked about Gamers Ranch, all the good food, the disc golf, the games that we played. Some things that are happening at some of our games right now. Some of my team members are prepping for Gen Con, getting ready for Gen Con, which happens in 2 weeks. And we do have a big booth there at Gen Con for you to look out for. I am working through some playtest results right now for a product that I'm working on, and I'm also working through some proofreading and starting some blind playtesting waves for some other products. Also, just another reminder that I do have a Rolling Realms live play today in the Rolling Realms Facebook group at 3:30 Central Time. And just for fun, before I focus on questions for the rest of this chat, right now we're watching The Witcher Season 3 on Netflix. We're also watching The After Party on Marvel, the new Marvel show, the Secret Invasion show. And I am reading the latest Brandon Sanderson book, Yumi and is it the Haunted Painter? I think that's the name of it, or the Painter of Nightmares? Painter? That might be it. Yumi and the Nightmare Painter sounds right to me. That's the new Brandon Sanderson book from his Kickstarter campaign. Joshua says, what is my personal favorite Stonemaier game? He says his is Scythe, but he's curious if Expeditions will take that top list. Joshua, I don't really have a favorite Stonemaier game. I love all the games that we produce. So my favorite Stonemaier game at any given time is the Stonemaier game that you want to play with me if I'm playing with someone who's really excited about one of our games. Nathan says we had a game night with 5 this week, and most of the game options were Stonemaier games because they all have options for 5+. That's a good default to remember. Whenever you have 5 or more people at game night, oftentimes 5, but sometimes 6, and you're looking for a game to play, look at your Stonemaier section of your shelf because every single game that we make, except for Smitten, plays up to 5 players. Tim says, wish him luck. His girlfriend's moms are coming into town. They want me to teach them games. Wingspan D&D and his current design prototype have all been demanded. Well, that's exciting, Tim. I do wish you the best of luck. I hope you have fun with your girlfriend and her moms this weekend. Chad says, I really enjoyed your favorite event systems video. That was my video from this past weekend. Thank you, Chad, for mentioning that. Not sure if this is something you want to share, but is this something you plan to incorporate into your open world game that you're designing? Yeah, I'm not going to talk specifically about that game, Chad. I appreciate your curiosity. But in general, yeah, I am thinking about event systems and games. I most prefer event systems that happen organically in a game, not where you are kind of remembering to draw an event card, but rather they happen organically as you play throughout the game. And I use Clank as an example of that as one of my favorite event systems in games. Because in Clank, at least the legacy version of Clank, when there are events, they are just shuffled into the deck, and when they appear in the card row, that's when they're triggered. I really like that. My friend Jake here is too. He says he's still buzzing from the ranch. It was great to have Jake there. Jake played some amazing disc golf there. And Jake also coordinated a 16-person Challengers tournament. So we played 2 separate games of Challengers at the same time. And then the champions of each of those games played a final head-to-head matchup. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast doing that. I went undefeated through the first 5 games and then lost the final 2. And so that didn't, the final 2 were the most important kind of, so I didn't make my way into the finale, but I was very close. Lori says they ended up in a funny situation while having fun with expeditions. He says, we have discovered that exploration kind of feels punishing rather than rewarding, especially when RNG isn't favoring you. Also, yeah, so that is the risk of exploration in expeditions. That's, I think some people aren't realizing that's there, but with expeditions, you don't know what's on the tile that you're moving to. And so if you have a move and a gather turn, you don't know what you'll be gathering that turn. It may not be something you necessarily want or that you really want at that moment. And so that's the risk of exploring. It isn't always good in expeditions to explore, even though you get that map token. Lori said there is a little bit of a misunderstanding here. There are no cards in expeditions that let you use the power of one of your opponent's mechs or cards. There's no card that lets you do that. There is a card in the game that lets you use one of your other cards or face-up cards in the map, but there are no cards in the game that require you to look at your opponent's cards for abilities. So that isn't a card in the game. I think there might be a misunderstanding there. And maybe, Lori, since you did have that mistake, let me know the name of that card, and I can let people know in the FAQ that they might be misplaying that. Because, yeah, definitely is no card in the game that... Well, I will say definitely, but I'm 99% sure there's no card in Expeditions that lets you use the power of an opponent's card or mech ability. Steve says, can you repeat the question again? So the question again, Steve, is what do you think about seasons of content? Like when a podcast has a season of content, even though the podcast is releasing episodes every week, they have a season of content that is either based around a central theme or just for the sake of having a season. What do you think about the concept of seasons of content? And not seasonal content, but seasons of content, often where they have a central theme to them or a distinct beginning and an end. Jim says, there is a lot of advice on getting your game from concept to funded, but I'm finding a knowledge cap in best practices for post campaigns. What's some of your best advice for post campaigns? What advice would you have for selling minimal product stock left over? That's a big question, Jim. It's a great question. I would recommend looking through my crowdfunding list of blog posts, because there's a 1/3 of that content that I have is about post campaign. There's a lot of content that I posted about what to do after the campaign. Well, let's see if I can think of one thing to tell you here today. Best advice for post campaign. What advice would you have for selling minimal stock left over? Well, I think this is where it really helps to have a web store presence or a relationship with distributors and retailers. And I know you can't just magically create that out of thin air, but that is something that you often need to be working towards from day one. But maybe the most important thing is, or two most important things are, one, Jim, continue to help your backers or encourage your backers to have fun getting your game to the table. The more they get the game to the table, the more other people see that game. And two, send out review copies. Ask reviewers if they're interested in your game and send out review copies to reviewers, because the more exposure your game gets, the more people might buy the game. But you do need to have a place for people to buy the game, like your own web store, a pledge manager, or retailers that carry the game, so that when people see those reviews, they have a way to buy the game. Julie says she didn't have a whole weekend with 20 people, but she said her husband and her celebrated their 10th anniversary a couple weeks ago and spent a weekend playing games at a B&B in Herman. That sounds amazing, Julie, and congrats on your 10th anniversary. They played Obsession, Terraforming Mars, and Everdell with 3 expansions, along with Smitten, Tussie Mussy, and Digital Wingspan for shorter games. We mostly focused on long games because we had the time and didn't have the kiddo with us, not what we usually have the opportunity to do on a regular week. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, my question was, what would you do if you had a gaming weekend with 20 of your favorite people? But yeah, feel free to answer it like Julie did. You just have your favorite person there with you, as Julie did on her gaming weekend with her husband. Sam says, two game list ideas that I would love to see on YouTube if I haven't done them already. One, games that have left your collection that you miss, and games that the second play of them changed your opinion for the better. The whys behind the games on the list would be awesome to listen to. Oh, yeah, Sam, I thought about making that. The games that have left my collection, that's a really tough one to do, to have, to talk about, because it's hard for me to remember which games I had in my collection and that are no longer there. And really, if they left the collection, the only reason that a game that I love left the collection is if I gave it to someone because I wanted to share a game that I love with somebody else. The second play, yeah, that's a tough one because oftentimes I have very strong first impressions of games, and I don't often go back to the game and play it again. That's a good one to think about, though. I can think of two games off the top of my head. I don't know if I have a top 10 list, so I'll make a note about second impressions. The two games that come to mind that became much stronger on the second and third plays were Castles of Burgundy, which I played the collector's edition of this past weekend, actually, and Skull King. Originally, I like Wizard a lot more than Skull King, but I've come around and I like Skull King now a lot more than Wizard. I gladly still play Wizard, but I really, really love Skull King. And that happened upon multiple plays of Skull King. But I'll think about that if I can come up with a full top 10 list. That might be a tough one, though. And I agree, like the why of what did I discover upon multiple plays and what maybe held the game back a little bit on the first play, because that's important too. You want the game to have the best first impression. I can try to talk about that. Jake says, I've heard the Colin and Samir YouTube channel recommend seasons as a way to stem off burnout. That's interesting. He says, I've considered it for decision space as a way to take a couple weeks off every few months. Burnout, yeah, you're right. Yeah, seasons give the creator time to take a much needed break and then come back reinvigorated to continue making the content. I like that. Joshua says, if I had a whole game day, I would probably set up a big 4X game, maybe Eclipse or Twilight Imperium. And I would say the game that was that way, kind of played that way, Joshua, at our Gamers Ranch was Hegemony. Hegemony was played either 3 or 4 times over the course of the long weekend and took around 4 or 5 hours each time. I didn't play it. I had already played Hegemony a few weeks before that. Alan says, a series example, American Horror Story. Each season is a single story, but the season has an overall feel. Yeah, I like the idea of anthology shows. Yeah. And even games sometimes have seasons of content, like Dice Throne. Dice Throne has seasons of content, I believe, and Pandemic Legacy has seasons of content. I'll make a note about those as well. So is there an advantage to a game itself having seasons of content? Ivan says he would like to introduce the chocolate of the day for him is Alpico Swiss chocolate, which is similar to Toblerone, but is much better. Nice, Ivan. I'm jealous of this Alpico Swiss chocolate. And I'm going to write that down to check out what makes Alpico so good. My chocolate of the day, I'm still working my way through some cacao chocolate. Cacao here in St. Louis is a delicious chocolatier. And I still have some chocolate from my visit to the farmer's market last week. Also, we went to the farmer's market yesterday, last night, for their Tuesday market and got some good popsicles, some good donuts, some really good Thai food, and really good mushroom sandwich from a place called Fat Fox that was delicious. Also went to Mr. Hand Pie and a local farm to get some fresh fruits and vegetables and honey-based ice cream, which is also really delicious. Alan says, a series example, the Adventure Zone podcast, changes the game system itself from season to season. Like they did D&D Season 1, Monster of the Week Season 2, Blades in the Dark Season 5. That's cool that they have a different focus each season, a thematic focus. I'll make a note about that. Different themes. Yeah. Chet says, I think a lot of shows thrive on the season opener buzz. Yeah, okay, I like that. Season opener buzz, season finale buzz, cliffhangers. Yeah. I'm so glad I asked you all these questions because you're way smarter than I am and think of all this stuff. Thank you so much for these answers. Nathan says, I tend to consume content as it comes, regardless of season, usually while I do other things like work or housework. I can definitely relate to that. I listen to podcasts often while I'm prototyping or working out. He says his wife, however, likes to plan time to sit down and be concentrating on the content. So knowing how many episodes to plan for is good for her. I'm going to note that as well. I like that seasons allow you to plan ahead. And as you said, Nathan, having seasons doesn't hurt the type of person who listens to content just on an ongoing basis. I will say, though, related to that, that for that type of person, myself included, that when I see the name of different episodes, the season part of it is the least relevant information in like the title of the episode. What's most important to me that I want creators to lead off with is what's unique about that specific episode, like the episode title, maybe the game that they're covering there, the mechanism they're covering, if they're looking at if it's like the Zelda podcast that I listen to, whatever is the specific part of that episode, that mechanism, that theme that they're covering in that episode. And then at the end of the title that they put season and episode number. Because if you lead off with that, sometimes the whatever podcast listening app that you're using doesn't show you the end of the title. It only shows you the beginning. And so it's, yeah, you get what I'm saying there. GG says, for a full weekend of gaming, he would probably include several games of Tapestry. Now they just picked up the custom insert. It makes it much easier to get the game to the table with all the expansions. I'm so glad to hear that. He says he still hasn't explored all the new civs and the expansions and would love some time to really play with them. Do you have a civ you'd love to play with, old or new? That does remind me about something else for, make a note about that. Do I have I still need to play with more of the new civs more often. I have not played with all of them multiple times, and I really want to. Part of me is waiting a little bit on getting the first, like the PPC for the revised civs for the first two expansions and the core game, because I'm excited to play with, the final real printed copy of them is always fun to play with. So I don't have a specific civ in mind right now. Steve has a tip for George, who was asking for tips about Tapestry. He says, I try to get rows and columns on his capital city early to try to get 200 plus points. I always spend the extra resource to get the income building. Totally. Christopher says he wanted to give Joe a quick shout out for his good and prompt customer service. Always glad to hear that about Joe and my coworker Dave, who work heavily on customer service. Chad says, I'm sure Jakob appreciates his privacy. He does. But do you think it would ever be possible to record an interview with him about the process of creating the 1920 plus world? Jakob, I don't get the sense that Jakob enjoys live conversations or even recorded conversations. So I think a lot of what you're going to see is secondhand through me. I'd say it's somewhat unfortunately, but I do respect that it just isn't Jakob's form of answering questions. But maybe at some point I could compile questions from people for Jakob to answer, or maybe he could do an Ask Me Anything on the Expeditions Facebook page. He might be open to that. You can tag him on the Facebook page for questions as well for Expeditions to see if he'll reply there. Tim says he likes the new $5 coins that we started making with Expeditions. They're easier to differentiate between the $10 coins for the original Scythe coins. Jake says he loves the show The After Party. And Jake, I mentioned that I've watched season 1, but season 2 of The After Party just began. And so far, it's pretty awesome. I'm really enjoying that so far. The first 2 episodes are fantastic. Carol says, I heard someone say that Catan, Miles got Catan him into the modern hobby. And then the first game he bought was Carcassonne. Carol says that Dominion got her interested in the hobby. Near and Far was the first game that got her addicted. And the first game she researched and bought on her own was the first Everdell Kickstarter. That's fun. Nathan says he remembers Libertalia being the game that got him interested in hobby games as an adult. That's the same for me, Nathan. I got that around the same time as Dominion and was just amazed by the simultaneous play of Libertalia and all the different combinations. Yeah, I loved it from the first play. He says Winds of Galecrest now holds a place of honor on his shelf because of that, related to that. Carol says seasons can work for organization. You could also just group videos per year without using the term seasons. That's true. Yeah, I could not arbitrarily, whatever the opposite of arbitrarily is, purposely, or group videos by year, if that would help people search by different content. Because you can, I mean, if you look at my older videos, I don't know if I'm less eloquent, but the videos are a little less polished, different sound, different lighting. And so a video from 7 years ago, there's a distinct difference, I think, in it between then and now. Tim confirmed, or says, similar to what Chad says, I think part of it is hype. For example, Diablo Season 4 now has seasons, so I think it brings a smaller close cycle, but also anticipation. And also seasons sometimes you can use them to give players different goals. Like in this season, the goal is to do this. Takes a lot of focus on a specific game, but we could do that for some of our games. So even though I wasn't aiming for the seasonal, I'll mention different goals or abilities. I've seen a lot of this with Marvel Snap. Has done a lot with seasons. Carol says that Ben, her husband, and her have their 15th wedding anniversary today. 15th. I heard 10th from Julie earlier. 15th for Carol and Ben. Congratulations, Carol. She's hoping to convince Ben to play a game tonight. Maybe we'll have some wine and play viticulture. That sounds like a wonderful way to spend your anniversary, Carol. Kevin says, for content with seasons, I only have experience with TV shows. For serialized shows, I like seasons with fewer episodes. I feel like there's less padding or filler episodes that stray a bit from the main content. Creators seem to be more focused on that. I'm going to make a note about that. The focus of smaller seasons. Size, length. Here we go. Yeah. Ian says he likes seasons on TV because usually there's an underlying theme to the season while still having other smaller storylines that go on for a few episodes or one episode. Absolutely. Carol says, when we do full gaming weekends, I love variety. I want some that we all know that we can relax with, some new games, and some big group lighter games. We do this a couple times a year with different people hosting. Yeah, I could definitely relate to that, to how we spent this past weekend. There were definitely some longer, heavier games. There were some games that were new to me, some games that were old to me. And there were some games that I really wanted to play, and some games I just went with the flow. If someone else wanted to play a game, I would see if they needed another player, and I would play with them. Yeah, a good variety, I think it was key. Jake says, you might want to include Magic the Gathering in the list for seasons of content. In Magic, you get to see new sets that impact the competitive environment about what is legal to play. Jake, you're absolutely right. I think Magic uses seasons in a really interesting way, especially for competitive play. Carol confirmed that Dice Throne does do seasons. I think that is for organizational and to distinguish Kickstarters and characters easily. There doesn't seem to be a theme to the characters within a season, though. Yeah, I agree with that. Julie says seasonal content could allow someone to dive into a particular focus in more depth, but for a limited period of time. I'm thinking about it more in terms of podcasts like Serial, but I'd be curious what that would look like for games. I'm going to make a note about that, and let me think about that. Allowing someone to focus on a game for a defined period of time. Because sometimes games are a little bit daunting. Like if you get into these games that have many, many different expansions or promos, Rolling Realms among them. Maybe I should have broken Rolling Realms up into seasons. Have seasons of Rolling Realms, because there are so many realms at this point. And in a way, I guess that's what we're doing with Rolling Realms Redux. We're saying, if now is another new time to get into the game if you want to. Here are 12 new realms, same core rules in the game. But yeah, I like what you're saying there, Julie. Okay, Lori says the card power was not using the opponent's card or mech power, but the exposed tile location benefit. Card number 063 Quest. Yeah, let's pull that up while we're talking about it real quick. Let's see what we're talking about. For Expeditions. Okay, Expeditions, Quest card 063. Let's see what it says. We'll do this live, because I want to make sure we get this right. Lori thinks it's overpowered. I respect your opinion, even if I might disagree. Let's see, 063. So this says gain an exposed benefit from an opponent's location. I see. That opponent gains a guile. So Yeah, I mean, it's a good benefit. It's a good benefit. It isn't all that, like, it's like a weaker gather benefit because you're gaining one icon. You're gaining one of the icons. So if the location the opponent is on, if the location's benefit is, say, a meld benefit and two power, you can gain only one of those icons. You can gain one power, you can gain the other power, or you can gain the meld. It's gain one of those icons. That's what it means when you gain an exposed benefit from a location. Same thing with if you're on a location and it looks to an adjacent location to say that you gain one exposed benefit, it's one icon of benefits. So I don't know if that's that strong. Maybe you were playing it as all the benefits from that location. Or maybe it is pretty good, even with just one benefit. It certainly can be good. I guess it is like, yeah, it is a weaker gather benefit, essentially, that you're using as you play a card. George said, oh, Ian has a nice comment. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. George says the first game for him was Catan and Power Grid, and his first Stonemaier game was Charterstone. Oh, yeah, I should have asked that about your first Stonemaier game as well. Thank you, George, for sharing that. Ian says the first games that got him into the modern gaming hobby were Ticket to Ride, Pandemic, and Small World. I'm pretty sure those were the first three he bought as well. I got into Ticket to Ride. In fact, I got into all three of those games a little bit. Well, no, Ticket to Ride and Pandemic I got into a little bit later. Small World and Lords of Waterdeep, I actually played them on the app before I even played the tabletop versions, and both of them have really good apps that I enjoyed. We have a question about round tracks. Round tracks, like tracks that keep track of the current round of the game. I think that's fine for games that need rounds. I think that's a good way to visibly show players that's the current state of the game. GG says that July 19th is a good day for weddings. That's today because today is his 9th anniversary with his wife. Happy 9th anniversary. So we got 10, 15, and 9 today. The 10th was a different day. She said, GG says, unfortunately, his wife has to work while his wife is home with the kids. We're both teachers, and I'm teaching summer school. Hopefully fit in some anniversary games later tonight. Well, happy anniversary, GG. That's wonderful. I hope your job is going well today. Trishul says, an online mapping between seasons and episodes and content is quintessential for me to find the content I want, especially as search technology for video audio content is not yet mature. I've used such lists extensively to find Top Gear specials. So I guess it's a way of helping you find certain content if there is maybe a theme to that content. And even just in general, I can see that helping with search terms. If someone refers to a specific episode, rather than saying, oh yeah, the episode where they got in a car crash on Top Gear, they can say that episode in season 2 where they got in a car crash, or episode 2 episode 2 of season 3 where they got in a car crash. Help you find it. Sean said he loved his first play of Expeditions last night. I'm glad to hear that, Sean. So Steve says that ability card 63 could be OP, overpowered, if it's a boast action, a boast benefit. Yeah, I could see that if it's a boast benefit. It is pretty good then. They're using boast as a play. So on your turn, you could potentially gather and then play the card 063 that gives you a boast that your opponent happens to be on. Maybe slightly overpowered. It's something for your opponents to keep an eye on, perhaps, if you do that. I think it's good to have some things in the game where you need to pay attention to your opponents, and that's one of them. Chet says, are you using new to Stonemaier Games artists for the games that you have in development? There's one artist whose art... We're working with one artist on 2 games, actually, but we have not shown their art before. In fact, most of the games that we have in progress are with artists that we have not worked with in the past. Yeah. Derek recommends Derek Loffman as a cartoonist artist. He hasn't worked in games yet, but he should be fantastic. Yeah, I will. Let me write that down. Derek Loffman. Yeah, thanks for that recommendation. I'll check that out. And Trishul says that cycles and seasons in Android Netrunner took us to different countries and locations. Oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah, I'm making a note about that. The different locations, not just different themes. Similar to themes, but yeah, I love this. All right, I think we've reached the end here. Again, if you want to go back and watch from the beginning, I talk about my experience at the Gamers Ranch this past weekend, playing a bunch of new to me games and some games that weren't new to me. And I mentioned an update very early on in the first, I think, 5 minutes about Expeditions shipping updates. And that today I'll be playing Rolling Realms at 3:30 Central Time. Thank you all for joining me. I love your comments. I love your questions. And I love your answers to the questions that I ask. That's always super helpful for the blog posts that I write. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I will see you next Wednesday. Take care. Bye.